I stared at the bank statement in my trembling hands, the black numbers mocking me. $15,000 transferred to an unknown account every month for the past 2 years. My heart pounded as the realization hit me like a freight train. Thomas had been lying to me all this time. "Lena? Are you all right?" Thomas's voice drifted from the living room, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Thomas, we need to talk." He ambled into the kitchen, that easy smile on his face that had once melted my heart. Now it only fueled the fire burning within me. "What's wrong, honey?" I slammed the statement down on the counter. "What is this? Who have you been sending money to every month?" His face paled as he glanced at the paper. It's nothing. Just some investments." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, my voice rising. "I'm not an idiot, Thomas. $15,000 every month for 2 years? That's not nothing." He ran a hand through his graying hair, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "All right, you got me. I have a son, from an affair 20 years ago." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. A son? An affair? After everything we'd been through together, after all the years of building a life and a family, he had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "All this time, you've been lying to me, to our daughter." Thomas reached for me, but I recoiled from his touch. "Lena, please, it was a mistake, a terrible mistake that I've regretted every day since. But I love you, and I love Caroline. You have to believe me." I shook my head, my heart shattering into a million pieces. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Get out of my sight, Thomas. I can't even look at you right now." He opened his mouth to protest, but the ringing of the doorbell cut him off. I brushed past him, wiping furiously at the tears streaming down my cheeks. "Mom? What's going on?" Caroline's concerned voice greeted me as I wrenched open the door. My beautiful daughter, the one constant light in my life, stood on the doorstep, her brow furrowed with worry. How could I tell her the truth? How could I shatter the perfect image of our family that she had grown up believing? "It's nothing, sweetheart," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a little disagreement between your father and me." Caroline's gaze flickered over my shoulder to where Thomas stood, his head bowed in shame. "Are you sure? You look upset." "I'm fine, really." I pulled her into a tight embrace, savoring the warmth and comfort of her presence. "Why don't you come in? We can catch up over some tea." As Caroline stepped inside, I caught a glimpse of Thomas's mother, Maureen, watching from the window of her house next door. Her face was impassive, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or maybe even pity. In that moment, I knew that she had known about Thomas's secret all along. And as I followed Caroline into the living room, my mind began to whir with the realization that this deception ran far deeper than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I marched over to Maureen's house, my fists clenched at my sides. The smug look on her face when she'd watched me yesterday told me everything I needed to know. She was complicit in Thomas's deception. I pounded on her door, my heart racing with a mixture of anger and dread. What other secrets were they keeping from me? Maureen opened the door, her eyes widening slightly at my disheveled appearance. "Lena, dear, what's wrong?" "Don't play dumb with me, Maureen," I snapped, brushing past her into the house. "You knew about Thomas's affair, didn't you? You've been helping him keep it a secret all these years." She pursed her lips, her expression hardening. "I did what I thought was best for the family." "Best for the family?" I let out a bitter laugh. "How is lying and deceiving me best for our family?" Maureen sank into an armchair, suddenly looking every bit of her 80 years. "Thomas was young and foolish back then. He made a mistake, but he's been a good husband and father ever since." "A good husband?" I shook my head in disbelief. "He's been funneling money to his secret son for years, Maureen. Years." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of genuine surprise cross her face. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the bank statements, thrusting them at her. "See for yourself. $15,000 every month, like clockwork." Maureen's hands trembled as she scanned the papers, her face paling. I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," I scoffed, "because lying and keeping secrets is what this family does best." "Lena, please, you have to understand," she pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. When Thomas told me about the affair, I was horrified, but he swore it was over, that he would never see that woman or the child again. I thought it was best to just move on, to protect our family. I shook my head, my heart hardening. Well, you failed spectacularly at that, didn't you? This secret has torn our family apart. Maureen reached out, grasping my hand in her papery one. I'm so sorry, Lena. I never meant for you to be hurt like this. But her apology rang hollow in my ears. How could I ever trust her again, knowing that she had enabled Thomas's deception for decades? Do you know who the son is? I asked, my voice low. The one Thomas has been supporting all these years? Maureen shook her head, her eyes downcast. No, I don't. Thomas never told me his name or anything about him. A sudden thought struck me, and I felt my stomach twist into knots. What if this secret son was closer than we realized? What if he was someone we knew, someone we had interacted with for years without ever knowing the truth? The possibilities were endless, and each one more horrifying than the last. I had to find out the truth, no matter what it took. As I left Maureen's house, my mind was whirling with a newfound determination. Thomas and Maureen had shattered my world with their lies, but I wouldn't let them get away with it. I would unravel every last secret, every deception, until the truth was laid bare for all to see. And then, perhaps, I could finally begin to pick up the pieces of my broken life and move on. That evening, Caroline came over for dinner as planned. I had considered canceling, not wanting to burden her with the weight of Thomas's deception, but I knew I couldn't keep this from her any longer. As we sat around the table, an uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Thomas kept shooting me furtive glances, his eyes pleading with me not to say anything. But I was done with secrets and lies. Caroline, I began, my voice trembling slightly, there's something your father and I need to tell you. She looked up from her plate, her brow furrowed. What is it, Mom? You're starting to worry me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the storm that was about to be unleashed. Your father, he had an affair 20 years ago, and he has a son from that affair. The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. Caroline's fork clattered to her plate as her mouth fell open in shock. What? She whispered, her eyes wide. Dad, is this true? Thomas nodded, his face ashen. It's true, sweetheart, but it was a long time ago, and I've regretted it every single day since. How could you? Caroline's voice rose, tinged with anger and hurt. How could you do this to Mom, to our family? Caroline, please let me explain, Thomas pleaded, reaching across the table for her hand. But she recoiled from his touch, her expression one of utter betrayal. No, Dad, there's no explanation that could possibly make this okay. She turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And you, Mom, how long have you known about this? I just found out yesterday, I admitted, my heart aching for the pain I was causing her. Your father has been keeping this a secret for years, sending money to his son every month. Caroline's gaze snapped back to Thomas, her jaw clenched. You've been supporting him? This whole time? Thomas nodded. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Yes, but I never meant for any of you to find out. I was trying to protect our family. Protect our family? Caroline let out a bitter laugh. By lying and deceiving us? By keeping a secret child hidden away like some dirty little secret? She pushed back her chair, rising to her feet. I can't even look at you right now, Dad. Or you, Grandma. Her gaze flickered to Maureen, who had been sitting silently in the corner, watching the scene unfold. Caroline, wait! I called out, but she was already heading for the door. Don't follow me, Mom, she threw over her shoulder, her voice thick with tears. I need some time to process all of this. And with that, she was gone, the door slamming shut behind her. I turned to Thomas, my heart heavy with the knowledge that our family might never be the same again. How could you, Thomas? I whispered, the words laced with a lifetime's worth of hurt and betrayal. How could you do this to us? But he had no answer, no justification that could possibly make up for the pain he had caused. In that moment, I knew that the bonds that had once held our family together were fracturing beyond repair. And as I looked at Maureen, her face etched with guilt and regret, I realized that the true victims in all of this were Caroline and me, the ones who had been lied to and deceived for far too long. In the days following Caroline's abrupt departure, I found myself scouring every nook and cranny of our home, desperate for any shred of evidence that could shed light on Thomas's deception. I knew there had to be more to this story, more lies, more secrets, more betrayals that had been carefully hidden away. It was almost as if a switch had been flipped inside me. The woman who had once been content to turn a blind eye, to maintain the facade of a happy family, was gone. In her place was a woman consumed by a burning desire for the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Late one night, as I was rifling through Thomas's desk drawers, my fingers brushed against a thick envelope tucked away in the back corner. My heart pounding, I pulled it out, my breath catching in my throat as I recognized Maureen's looping handwriting on the front. With trembling hands, I tore open the envelope, my eyes scanning the pages inside. It was a letter, dated almost 20 years ago, from Thomas to his mother. As I read the words, a sick feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Thomas had poured out his heart, confessing to the affair and the child he had fathered, expressing his deep regret and shame. But what struck me the most was the tone of the letter. It was the desperate plea of a man seeking forgiveness, not the casual dismissal of a one-time mistake. Tears stung my eyes as I realized the depth of Thomas's deception. He hadn't just had a brief fling, as he had claimed. This had been a full-blown affair, one that had clearly weighed heavily on his conscience for years. And Maureen had known about it all along. A wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. How dare they keep this from me? How dare they let me live in blissful ignorance while they harbored this earth-shattering secret? In that moment, I knew that I couldn't let this stand. Thomas and Maureen had to pay for what they had done, for the years of lies and betrayal that had poisoned our family. And I knew just how to make them suffer. With a newfound determination, I tucked the letter back into the envelope and slipped it into my purse. This was the key, the weapon I needed to dismantle their carefully constructed facade once and for all. I would reveal the truth, bit by agonizing bit, until Thomas and Maureen were forced to confront the full extent of their deceit, and then perhaps I could finally begin to heal from the wounds they had inflicted upon me. As I climbed into bed that night, a sense of calm washed over me. The path ahead would be difficult, no doubt, but I was ready to face it head-on. I would not be a victim any longer. I would be the architect of my own revenge. In the days that followed my discovery of Thomas's letter, I found myself withdrawing further and further into myself. The anger and hurt I felt were like a constant gnawing ache, one that no amount of tears or screaming could alleviate. It was during one of those dark nights, as I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, that I remembered my oldest friend, Betty. We had been inseparable as children, thick as thieves, until our lives had taken different paths. But through it all we had remained close, confiding in each other through every triumph and heartbreak. Without a second thought, I reached for my phone and dialed her number. It was late, but I knew Betty. She would answer, no matter the hour. "Lena?" Her voice was thick with sleep, but instantly alert. "What's wrong, honey?" The dam burst then, and I found myself pouring out the whole sordid tale. Thomas's affair, the secret son, Maureen's complicity in the lies. Betty listened in stunned silence, only the occasional sharp intake of breath betraying her shock. When I had finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Betty spoke, her voice low and steely with resolve. "That bastard," she growled. "How dare he do this to you, Lena, after everything you've sacrificed for that family?" I let out a shuddering breath, grateful for her unwavering support. "I don't know what to do, Betty. I feel like my whole life has been a lie." "You know what you have to do?" Betty's tone was firm, brooking no argument. "You have to fight back. You have to make them pay for what they've done to you." A spark of determination flickered to life within me, fanning the flames of my anger. "You're right," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I can't just sit back and let them get away with this." "Damn straight," Betty agreed. "And you know I'm going to be right there with you every step of the way." A plan began to form in my mind, one that would require careful execution and an iron will. But with Betty by my side, I knew I could do it. "Betty," I said, my voice low and resolute, "I need your help. As a lawyer, you have access to resources that I don't. I need you to dig into Thomas and Maureen's lives to uncover every last secret they've been keeping from me." There was a pause, and then Betty's voice came through, steely and determined. "Consider it done. Those lying bastards won't know what hit them." A grim smile tugged at my lips as I ended the call. For too long, I had been the victim, the one left in the dark while those closest to me spun their webs of deceit, but no more. With Betty's help, I would systematically dismantle every last lie, every carefully constructed facade that Thomas and Maureen had built. And when the dust settled, they would be left with nothing but the harsh, unforgiving truth that they had brought upon themselves. It was time for me to take control of my own life, to shed the shackles of their betrayal, and forge a new path forward. And if that meant exacting a little revenge along the way, well, so be it. They had made their choices, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. With Betty's help, I began to gather every shred of evidence I could find. Bank statements, phone records, even old letters and emails. The more we uncovered, the more sickened I became by the depth of Thomas and Maureen's deception. It turned out that the money Thomas had been sending to his secret son was just the tip of the iceberg. There were offshore accounts, hidden investments, even a safety deposit box filled with cash and valuables, all carefully hidden away from me over the years. As the full scope of their lies became clear, a cold fury settled over me. They had not only betrayed me emotionally but financially as well, squirreling away resources that could have made our lives so much easier. Finally, after weeks of meticulous investigation, I felt ready to confront them. I arranged for us all to gather at Maureen's house. Thomas, Maureen, Caroline, and even Will, the son Thomas had kept hidden for so long. As they filed in, their expressions ranged from confusion to outright hostility. Thomas shot me a warning look, but I met his gaze with steely resolve. "What's this all about, Mom?" Caroline asked, her brow furrowed. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. It's time for the truth to come out, once and for all. Turning to Thomas and Maureen, I leveled them with a withering glare. "You two have been lying to us for far too long, not just about the affair and Will, but about so much more." From my bag, I withdrew the stack of evidence Betty and I had compiled. Bank statements, phone records, even the damning letter from Thomas to Maureen all those years ago. "You've been hiding money, keeping secrets, living a double life right under our noses," I continued, my voice rising with each accusation. "And you've kept this from Will, too. Your own son, Thomas. How could you?" Will's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "What is she talking about, Dad?" But Thomas remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor in front of him. "That's right, Will," I said, turning to face him. "Thomas is your father. He's the one who's been sending you money all these years, keeping you at arm's length while he played the perfect family man with us." The room erupted into chaos then, with Caroline and Will firing questions at Thomas and Maureen, demanding answers. But the two of them remained stubbornly silent, their faces etched with shame and defiance. Finally, Caroline rounded on her father, her eyes blazing with fury. "How could you, Dad? How could you lie to all of us like this, for so many years?" Thomas opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply shook his head, his shoulders slumped in defeat. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of victory wash over me. The carefully constructed facade they had built, the web of lies they had spun for decades, had finally come crashing down around them. And as I looked at the shattered remains of our family, I realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and painful, but at least now we could start to heal, without the burden of their secrets weighing us down. As for Thomas and Maureen, they would have to face the consequences of their actions, just as I had faced the consequences of their betrayal. It was only fair, after all, an eye for an eye, a lie for a lie. And if they thought this was the end of it, they had another thing coming. Because I was just getting started. In the aftermath of my explosive revelation, our family was left in tatters. Thomas, unable to face the consequences of his actions, retreated to Maureen's house like a wounded animal licking its wounds. Caroline, meanwhile, found herself adrift, torn between her anger at her father and her desire to understand the half-brother she had never known existed. As for me, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The weight of Thomas and Maureen's lies had been lifted, and in its place was a newfound strength, and determination. I was done being the victim. It was time to take control of my own life. The first step, I decided, was to sell our family home. It had once been a sanctuary, a place filled with love and laughter, but now it felt tainted by the ghosts of their deception. I needed a fresh start, a clean slate on which to build a new life for myself. Caroline was surprisingly supportive of my decision, perhaps sensing that it was a necessary step in my healing process. She even offered to help me sort through our belongings, a task that proved to be both cathartic and emotionally draining. As we packed up the remnants of our old life, Caroline would occasionally pause, her fingers tracing over a cherished memento or family photo. "How could he do this to us, Mom?" she would ask, her voice thick with emotion. "After everything we've been through together, how could he throw it all away like this?" I would simply shake my head, unable to offer any words of comfort or wisdom. The truth was, I didn't have the answers. I was just as lost and confused as she was. But through it all, a bond began to form between us, a shared understanding of the pain and betrayal we had endured. Caroline slowly started to see her father's actions for what they truly were: a selfish, cowardly act that had torn our family apart. And as she came to terms with the reality of his lies, she began to gravitate towards me, seeking the comfort and support that only a mother could provide. It was during one of those late-night packing sessions that Caroline turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have believed you from the start. I should have seen how much you were hurting." I pulled her into a fierce embrace, my own tears spilling down my cheeks. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll get through this together." And in that moment, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it as a united front, two strong, resilient women who had been forged in the fires of betrayal and emerged stronger than ever before. As for Thomas and Maureen, they had made their choices, and now they would have to live with the consequences. I had no more anger or resentment towards them, only a deep, abiding sadness for the family we had lost. But even as I mourned the past, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope for the future. With Caroline by my side and the support of my dear friend Betty, I knew that I had the strength to rebuild, to create a new life for myself that was free from the shackles of their lies. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, there was even the possibility of finding love again, of opening my heart to someone who would cherish and respect me in a way that Thomas never could. As I looked around at the half-packed boxes and bare walls, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of a new, exciting one, and I couldn't wait to see what adventures lay ahead. Months later, I found myself reflecting on the events that had turned my world upside down. Thomas's betrayal, the unraveling of our marriage, and the eventual decision to start over on my own terms. It had been a difficult and painful journey, but one that had ultimately set me free. As I packed up the last of my belongings in the house we had shared, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and closure. The weight of his deceit had been lifted, and I was able to walk away with my head held high, knowing that I'd done everything in my power to save the relationship, even if it meant letting go in the end. But even in my darkest moments, I never lost sight of my self-worth. I knew that I deserved better than to be trapped in a loveless marriage, constantly second-guessing myself and living in fear of his next betrayal. As I sorted through the remnants of our life together, I felt a strange sense of peace. There was no more anger or bitterness, only a calm acceptance of the circumstances that had led me to this point. I had fought hard to hold our family together, but sometimes, no matter how hard you try, there is simply too much damage to repair. In the end, his inability to be truthful, to face his mistakes, and take responsibility for his actions had been his downfall. And while I grieved the loss of the life I had once known, I also recognized that it was a necessary step in my own growth and self-discovery. As I packed up the last box, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation for what the future might hold. For so long I had been defined by his actions, his choices, but now I was free to be my own person, to live life on my own terms. There was a certain liberation in that, a freedom that came from finally being able to let go of the hurt and betrayal that had weighed me down for so long. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing me to see the world with new eyes, unencumbered by the baggage of the past. And so I left, carrying with me only what I needed: my self-respect, my dignity, and the knowledge that I had the strength to start over, to build a new life for myself, one untainted by the mistakes and disappointments of the past. It was a bittersweet moment, to be sure, but one that was ultimately empowering. I had survived the worst of it, and now I was free to move forward, to embrace the future with open arms and an open heart. As I stepped out into the world, I felt a sense of renewal, a rebirth of sorts. The past was behind me, and the future stretched out before me, full of endless possibilities. And while I knew there would be challenges and setbacks along the way, I also knew that I had the strength and resilience to face them head-on. So I let the past go, releasing the hurt and anger that had consumed me for so long. I let go of the fear and the shame, the self-doubt and the regret. I let it all go, and in doing so, I found a newfound freedom, a lightness of being that had been missing for so long. And as I walked away, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't known in years. I was finally free to be myself, to live my life on my own terms, without the weight of his betrayal holding me back. It was a new beginning, a chance to start over, to rebuild and to heal. And while the road ahead was uncertain, I knew that I had the strength and the courage to face whatever challenges came my way. So I let the past go, and I walked forward into the future, my head held high, my heart light, and my spirit free, and my spirit free, and my spirit free, and my